So, how do you build a government that actually serves its people? It's a question every single country on Earth is wrestling with. Today, we're going to break down the key insights from this huge report by India's Second Administrative Reforms Commission. Yeah, it's a deep dive in ethics and corruption, but what it really gives us is a universal blueprint for change. Okay, let's get into it. The report kicks things off with this really powerful warning from Plato, and man, it just sets the tone perfectly. This isn't just some academic exercise. The quality of our government, our governance, it affects literally every part of our lives. The stakes for getting this right are, well, they're about as high as they get. Okay, so before we can even talk about solutions, we've got to understand the problem. The report goes way back to the root of the word corruption itself. It's not just about bribes or somebody stealing money. The Latin root means to break or destroy. And that's the key takeaway here. Corruption is seen as something that fundamentally breaks the trust and destroys the very function of the state. So what's the diagnosis? How does the report see this issue? Well, it doesn't just point fingers at a few bad apples. Nope. Instead, it frames corruption as a systemic sickness, a really deep-rooted illness that's woven into the very structure of how things are run. The report then lays out this crucial choice for us. Do we focus on individual morality, trying to make people better? Or do we focus on fixing the broken system itself? The argument it makes is that while our values are like our guiding stars, they need strong institutions to actually work. Without that solid foundation, even the best intentions in the world just kind of get worn down and fade away. So what are these systemic flaws? The report points to a few major culprits. First, you've got this massive power imbalance between regular citizens and officials. Then there's the absolute maze of overregulation that just traps people in red tape. You've also got the huge impact of government monopolies in key areas. And finally, an economy of scarcity, where limited resources create this perfect breeding ground for graft. All right, with the diagnosis clear, the report moves on to the prescription. And the first part of this cure is all about redesigning the rules of the game, making them simpler, clearer, and a whole lot harder for anyone to abuse. Have you ever felt totally lost in a bureaucratic maze? I mean, that's the day-to-day reality for so many people. The report points out this really common but totally flawed reaction to corruption. Just add another layer of approval. But that usually just makes the whole problem worse, right? It causes more delays and makes it pretty much impossible to figure out who's even responsible for anything. So what's the fix? Oh, this is the good part. It's brilliantly simple. First, radically simplify all the processes. Then, set up single-window centers where people can get everything done in one place. You also have to reduce the power of officials to make these random, arbitrary decisions. And my personal favorite? Introduce positive silence. What that means is, if the government doesn't get back to you by a set deadline, your request is automatically approved. How about that? Okay, let's move on to the next part of the prescription, because this goes way beyond just simplifying rules. This is about fundamentally rewiring the entire system of government to make it naturally resistant to corruption. And this, right here, is the core argument of the entire report. It says that trying to fight corruption with just another anti-corruption campaign is, well, it's a fallacy, a mistake. Instead, the most powerful antidote is changing the very architecture of the state. It's about building a system where corruption just plain struggles to find a place to hide. So how do you build this new architecture? The report suggests 4 key pillars. First, you've got to promote competition to break up those monopolies. Second, simplify transactions, which we've already touched on. Third, use technology to cut down on human interference. And finally, increase transparency so that everything is happening out in the open. This is a brilliant illustration of that first pillar in action. The report points to the telecom sector. Back when it was a state monopoly, getting a simple phone line could take years and, well, a lot of extra payments. But once competition was introduced, suddenly there was choice, costs plummeted, and corruption in that sector was practically wiped out. And look, this isn't some unique thing. We've seen this pattern play out all over the world, anytime you break up a state-run monopoly. And here's another awesome example, this time focusing on technology. When India computerized railway tickets and land records, it was an absolute game changer. By making the whole process automated and totally transparent, they basically eliminated the middlemen who thrived on creating confusion and harassing people for bribes. This cleaned up systems that millions of people rely on every single day. And that principle holds true anywhere technology is used to make things clear, fair, and open. So far, we've talked a lot about what the government can do, but the report makes it crystal clear that the system won't just heal on its own. It needs everyone, especially its citizens, to be actively involved. So this section is all about empowering the patient in this cure.
So, where do we fit in? The report argues that an empowered public is absolutely essential to hold people in power accountable. So, what kind of tools do we have?
Well, the report highlights a whole toolkit for citizens. You've got things like the Right to Information Act, which it calls a potent weapon. You've got citizens' charters, which set clear standards for service. Social audits, where communities can directly check up on government projects. And then there's the simple but so crucial act of consulting the public before any big decisions are made. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are real tools that can transform citizens from passive recipients into active watchdogs.
All right, let's pull all these threads together now. After diagnosing the illness and prescribing all these really practical cures, the report doesn't just end with a list of fixes. It ends with a powerful vision. It reminds us why we're doing all this in the first place, what the ultimate goal of good governance really truly should be.
I think this ancient verse, which is quoted in the report, just captures that vision perfectly. It's this idea that public office isn't for your own private gain. It's a resource that you hold in trust for the benefit of everybody else. It's just a profound and really poetic way to define public service.
And that brings us to the end. The report gives us this detailed, practical blueprint for how to build a more ethical and effective government. But the crucial point it leaves us with is this. The plans are right there on the table. The question now is, what will it take from all of us, citizens and leaders alike, to